Hello, good morning and welcome to my YouTube channel Hlspwns World. This video has been a long time in the making. It has taken me ages to dial in the VR settings for the Oculus Rift CV1 with Project Cars 2 and the RTX 2080 Ti. So just a bit of a spoiler alert, I did think that having an RTX 2080 Ti, that in VR with the Oculus I'd be able to max all the settings and hit a smooth 90 frames per second. But Project Cars 2 is a little more intense than what I thought, and you certainly can't max all the settings and get a clean 90. Now that's wholly dependent on some of your settings. And to be honest, when I first played Project Cars 2 in VR with an RTX 2080 Ti, something felt off to me, something didn't feel quite right. And let's get straight into it and say that if you go into your SteamVR settings, that on video, if you go to the manual override, SteamVR had recommended that the settings for my GPU should be 200% scaling in the headset, because of the graphics card that I've got. Now what it was set to when I had an AMD R9 Fury X, I'm not sure, but I'm not that back to 100% because I don't believe 200% scaling is doing us any favours in a performance sit. And not only that, the Oculus Rift will only scale to its maximum resolution anyway, so why push it way beyond what it can actually do? So starting out, I just put that to a manual override on and set that to 100%. If I go back into Steam and we get Project Cars 2 loaded up, I'll show you the settings that I have done in the game. Right, now that we're into the settings in Project Cars 2, let's go into the options, and because I've got the VR headset connected, we can see the virtual reality options that I've got set up. So gaze control I don't use, so I've left that off. The super sampling I'm running at 1.4. I was running it a lot higher, but the cost with the other settings was causing the frame rate to drop too low. But you need a good level of super sampling to keep the images within the headset crystal clear and sharp. So I've gone for 1.4. I don't recenter my view on boot, and I don't do it at the start of the race. I've got a button mapped on my wheel that I manually reset settings. So I've got super sampling 1.4, and if I go into the performance, you can see that I'm rendering the headset at 1920 by 1080. Well, that's what's coming over to my secondary screen. Obviously we know in the Oculus Rift CV1 that we're going to hit in 90 frames per second. We don't run it in Windows. Texture resolution, I've got that at high. We want that as high as we can get because we want all our textures to be crisp and clear. Now I'm running anisotropic texture filtering at 16 times. Again, we want everything as clear as we can. The MSAA, I'm just going on a very low setting. I found with it off, everything's just a little too blurry and a little, I wouldn't say out of focus, but with it on, it just cleans everything up enough to look quite crystal clear. Now reflections, I've got on high. Obviously, if you have wet weather in the game or you've got mud or any surfaces like that, with them set to high, you get the detail and clarity in the headset that you need to see. You need to see where drying lines are. So to me, that's quite important. The environment map I've set to low because that maps the quality of in-game reflections as seen on car bodywork, windows, other buildings within the other things. I'm not too bothered about that. In the VR headset, we're more concentrating on the track and the other cars. So for that reason, we want the car detail to be on ultra. The cars, other cars, are what we're seeing in a race, and you want them to look the best as possible. Now the track detail, believe it or not, I have on low, and I've found that in my continuous endless testing that setting this to high really has a big performance impact at certain areas on the track. Now the mileage on this setting may vary, depends on your hardware, and we've all got practically different hardware. I'm running an AMD Ryzen 7 1700X that's overclocked to 3.9 GHz. Now I am aware that my first gen Ryzen isn't as high performing as Intel processors in gaming, and I do lose a few frames per second. So if I had an Intel chipset, perhaps I might get a bit more of a boost, and I could boost some more of these settings. But moving on, pit crew detail I've just put for me, player only. The less to render in the pits, the better. I don't think that's going to make a massive difference in performance. I'm not sure. I've just left it on player only. Shadow detail, I did have this on ultra. Again, to me it's as important as the car detail. I've knocked it down to high just to give that better frame rates. On ultra it seemed to knock a bit of performance down, so I've turned that to high. Enhanced mirror, no, we don't want that on. Motion blur I don't use. Then we have the detail grass. Now to be honest, in an Oculus Rift I'm not bothered about detail grass. If the grass looks like grass, which it does, and you shouldn't be on the grass, then who cares? Turn that off. It might not be a great performance impact, but I've turned it off anyway. Particle level and particle density are both set to low. I'd love to have these on a much higher setting, but when you've got headlights on and they're reflecting off particles and things going on, again it puts another massive overhead on the VR settings. So I've set these to low. With these settings that I've done here, when the race starts, you do start at a low frame rate until you get around the first quarter, half the lap, and everything seems to settle down. With my system and these settings, I get almost a constant 90 frames per second, and that's with catering for the very, very, very worst scenarios. Thunderstorms, 17, 18 cars on track, spray, rain, everything. I want the optimal settings that I don't have to mess about with this, because sadly an SMS in Project Cars free. If you could come up with some way of letting us know what level of cost these settings are to the headset without having to change something, come out the game, go back in the game, change it, come out the game. Every time you change some of these details, you have to quit the game and come back in from take effect. Now when you're doing testing, as I have been, it takes a lot of time. If there was a system to speed that up, it would be greatly received. So what I've done, just to give you an idea of how these settings perform, I've teed up a race in one of the old school touring cars at Donington Park. I'll see you out with that video, and this video has caused a little backlog, and hopefully I'll be getting a lot more content to you pretty soon. Thank you for watching, and I will see you after the end of this video in the next one.
about defending from that guy behind. Behind us, try and make it fast. Think about the